Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how do you handle OCD meltdowns without making them worse. And that is the million-dollar question, because if you're raising a child with OCD, you're probably dealing with some meltdowns too. And we're going to talk about why that is and how it's a bit counterintuitive on how to approach those meltdowns. So we'll get right into it. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. I am also doing my survival series again, Survival Tools for Parents Raising Kids with Anxiety and OCD. That is starting in just a few weeks, my most popular series. Although I did an anchor series recently that's brand new, and that actually might be even more popular. We will see. But parents love this series because I give you practical tools on how to help your child's anxiety or OCD right away. And so we go over communication and trust. We go over identifying core fears. We go over where are you supposed to start, your entry point, no matter where you are currently in your journey, even if it feels really messy, and how to set up micro goals and incentivize all sorts of things. And parents do leave that series feeling really full of concrete tips and things to practice right away. So you can register for that. It is a free series that I do twice a year. You can register at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. That's atparentingsurvivalseries.com. Messed myself up. All right. Let's dive into today's topic about how to handle OCD meltdowns and especially not make them worse. Let's first talk about how OCD meltdowns are different than tantrums. There is a difference. Our kids are physiologically overwhelmed due to OCD, and sometimes they're overwhelmed because they are dealing with so many intrusive thoughts and feelings, or they're in the middle of a compulsion and it's interrupted or not accommodated. Those are kind of the two most common reasons why there are OCD meltdowns. A third reason is if your child has PANDAS and PANS, and I can leave a link to that as well, then your child has mood dysregulation on top of OCD, and so rages, unprovoked, not triggered, are also a symptom of PANDAS and PANS. And so if you're seeing chronic meltdowns and rages that weren't there before and that are kind of out of the blue, and you have some other symptoms of PANDAS and PANS too, and I'll link some resources to check that out, that would be something to consider. We're not going to be talking about that today because that is very physiological and they are unprovoked, not triggered at all. And so we have to go down that rabbit hole of figuring out medically what's going on. But today we're going to be talking about OCD meltdowns, which are different than tantrums too, because tantrums happen often out of wanting to get their way or defiance or testing boundaries. They're developmentally appropriate at certain ages, and they're shaped and decreased by the parent-child interaction. So if I have a 4-year-old who's having tantrums because they can't accept no, ideally, as they get older and I'm firm in setting boundaries, those tantrums decrease because the child learns how to accept no, they learn how to regulate their moods, they learn that I don't cave in, and we're moving on. There are older kids who have tantrums because the parent does give in, there's not consistency, the boundaries aren't set. So you do have older kids that have tantrums, and that's not it's not a good look in my personal child therapist opinion. But OCD meltdowns are different. And that can be hard because it can feel like we can be judged by other people because they might have that, what I just said. They might have that judgment or impression when it's nothing to do with your parenting. You probably, tried to curb those tantrum type of behaviors when they were 4 or 5, and you're dealing with OCD meltdowns now, which are a totally different beast. Those are driven by anxiety or by overwhelm, and it's hard for both you and the child. And so anybody, adults, can have OCD meltdowns because it's just so much. So let's talk about what's happening in the brain when a person is having an OCD meltdown. They are stuck in a fight or flight response. And so in that moment, they are either overwhelmed, so overwhelmed with the barrage of intrusive thoughts, and or it could be both. You interrupted their compulsion. A lot of times when kids are in a compulsion, they're in a compulsion cycle, or they're stuck in a compulsion, and then somebody interrupts them, they can go ballistic. Or, and this is a really big or, like this is the most common one, is you're not giving in to what the OCD is demanding. And so you are the target of the meltdown. That is really, really common when we're raising kids with OCD. And so logic doesn't work in this moment because their brain is stuck on the fight, flight, or freeze mode where their adrenaline is pumping, their cortisol is pumping, and their ears and their problem solving and their rational side of their brain has turned off. And so that becomes tricky because you've lost all contact with your rational child. And if you've dealt with this before, you're like, that's absolutely correct. They are not in there anymore. And it is containment at that point. For the person having the meltdown, they feel like it is an actual emergency. Similar to a panic or anxiety attack, it feels like there is an emergency going on and that they are so dysregulated and so out of control that it feels like an emergency. And as they're doing these compulsions, if that is part of it, it is temporarily soothing, but ultimately it's reinforcing the meltdown cycle. And so if they are having a meltdown because you won't do what OCD dictates that you do, yes, if you give in, they calm down. And then you create this loop, this feedback loop inadvertently that says, when I rage, I get relief. Because then OCD is satisfied, I get what I want, and then I'm better. It's not like it's a manipulative, calculated understanding of that. I'm going to rage now, and then my mom will cave in. It is a feedback loop that you create and you solidify every time you give in to the meltdown cycle and cater OCD, and then the meltdown goes away. There's this reinforced feedback loop. And so we don't want that. And that is really hard. But I'll hear a lot of parents say things like, well, I don't want him to melt down, or I'm scared of him melting down. I don't know what he'll do. And if that is the case, if you're worried about what they'll do in the interim, if you put your foot down, I always say to parents, you're hijacked either way. You're hijacked if you are having OCD by proxy, which basically means OCD is the boss of you as well as your child, teen, or young adult. And so I have to do what OCD wants me to do, or there'll be consequences for me as well. And so then you become hijacked. You are on a hamster wheel just as much as your child is. You might as well have OCD as well because you're doing everything. I mean, I've read in the AT parenting community, we have a lot of parents there who have extreme acute cases of OCD, and they'll talk about things like, having to leave their home or follow the level of rule following that they will list. I am shocked at how much OCD can dictate and take over and really hijack you as a parent, and that you're spending all day doing what OCD wants, and you are disordered just as much as your child. And I understand why parents get stuck in that, because the alternative is a screaming, raging child, teen, or young adult who may self-harm or harm other people, and you don't know how to deal with that, and you feel like that is more damaging than me just doing what OCD wants and having a calm house. The flip side of that, though, is something that you want to consider, which is as long as you continue doing that, your child, teen or young adult, long-term progress will never improve. Will never improve as long as you are hijacked by OCD as well. You have to free yourself from OCD. You have to escape OCD in order to rescue your child. You can't be kidnapped as well and get out of OCD. It doesn't work that way. You have to leave your captor in order to be able to rescue your child. And for some people, if the meltdowns are too extreme, you want to look at possibly medication for mood stability. Talk to your psychiatrist. Is there something either as needed that you can give your child? We at my house have as needed medication that calms my children down when they're in rages. Mainly just one child, but my other child uses it for anxiety attacks. A lot of times they'll prescribe like an antihistamine, and so it's not an antipsychotic, it's not a mood stabilizer, it's not SSRI, it is just an antihistamine that helps reduce rage. So that might be an option. Talk to your psychiatrist. Maybe they do need a mood stabilizer if they're dealing with ongoing rages, and you've ruled out pandas and pans. There are a lot of our kids who have co-occurring mood instability issues and mood disorders, and they might need a mood stabilizer to help them. The second thing that's really important is, do you have a crisis plan? What does it look like? Because you can't be held captive because your child is going to hurt themselves or other people. If that's the case and you're worried daily about them hurting themselves or other people, they need a higher level of care, which means they need to be an inpatient, or they need to be inpatient until they get the right medications, or they need to be in a treatment center because they're not safe. If it's only when you don't feed the OCD, then you need a crisis plan. And that crisis plan, you want to talk to the therapist or a psychiatrist if you have one, of what does that look like? And if you don't have a therapist or psychiatrist, it might be, or even if you do, it might be, do we have local mobile crisis units? In Arizona, in Phoenix, where I live, we do. There are mobile crisis units that will respond to children and teens and adults. But I have that number. I've never had to use it, but I have it because that empowers me to know that if things get out of control, I have a 24-hour crisis mobile unit that I can call to get help. I researched this. There are ones in Canada. There are ones in the UK. So just look for that. Google mobile mental health crisis units or mobile crisis units, and you'll see what's in your area. But that's important. If you're uncomfortable with that, do you have relatives who help calm your child, teen, or young adult down, or can kind of make sure things stay safe? I'm a small person, and so I can't physically manage my son if he chooses to get out of control. I won't be able to keep him physically safe, or my daughter, really, because I'm not strong that way. And so if you feel threatened in that way, is there somebody else that you have that you could call that would help create and calm the situation down? So those are things that you want to think about, because that's the number one reason why parents will say, I can't not feed the OCD. And also you want to learn, how do you systematically pull back from enabling OCD? And that is not one and done, like pull the Band-Aid off. It wasn't created overnight. It's not going to be reduced overnight, but learning approaches to systematically pull back your enabling of OCD is really important. And so check out Ellie Leibowitz's The Space program at spacetreatment.net. Can be really helpful. There are space therapists that will work directly with you and not your child on how you systematically pull back that involvement with OCD, and getting that professional support can be really helpful. I also have an on-demand study course on the same topic. It's a space study guide course, and you can check that out at atparentingsurvivalschool.com, and it's one of my many courses in there for anxiety and OCD. But there's ways to help. So what we don't want to do during meltdown, having said all that, is we don't want to try to reason with OCD. We don't want to say things like, you don't need to be scared of that, or you didn't touch that, or let's think about this rationally. Like, why would blah, 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 right? OCD doesn't care about reason in general, and it certainly doesn't care about it when they're in the middle of a meltdown. Ideally, you want to avoid giving reassurance that satisfies OCD. And so if they're looking for, did I touch that? Did I touch that? Or did I eat that? Or did I say that? Or did I do that? That reassurance, even though they seem so frantic and wanting that advice and wanting that reassurance, that's a compulsion. And so explaining to your kids how reassurance is a compulsion, I do have a video on that and I will link it. But we don't want to give them that OCD reassurance that perpetuates the loop. The other thing is we don't want to force them to push through immediately. We don't want to talk to them about, doing exposures or, it's not the time to coach. They're not in a space to coach. We're going to go radio silent, and we're not going to get hooked in. We're not going to engage. We're not going to punish. We're not going to shame. We're not going to say stuff like, you can't talk to me that way, or, you need to pick up the thing that you just threw. We're not going to get into that right now because their brain is in shutdown mode and they're in rage mode and all they're doing is seeing red, and you adding that level of stress is like fuel to the fire. You're going to make them explode more. And the goal when they're melting down is containment. How do I contain the situation? How do I contain, the harm to themselves, to other people, to property, and bring the situation to a lower volume as soon as I can, which we don't have a lot of control over the time factor, but we just want to contain. All right. So after the break, I'm going to talk about what do you do instead? What are some good approaches, how to prevent future meltdowns, and tackle this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. All right, so the first half we talked about why kids have OCD meltdowns and what not to do, ideally. So what do you do instead? Well, the first thing and the hardest thing is to regulate yourself first. It's so hard to stay calm. That's why probably my Anchor series was so popular is it was a whole series on how to do this. And this is one of the hardest parts of the parental journey, is anchoring ourselves, especially during storms, because it can feel really overwhelming. Our kids could be saying things that are trying to hook us in. It feels good for them to adrenaline dump. And part of that is raging and getting us to rage too. That feels physiologically satisfying. It's not like they want to do it necessarily, but there is a reinforcement in that behavior. So learning how to calm yourself, ground yourself. I always say to myself, what do they need from me right now? I'm not going to take this personally because they're obviously not here right now. They're not here right now. Everything they're saying, everything they're doing, they're not here right now. What do they need from me in this moment? And for me in my house, with my son at least, what they need from me in that moment is for me to not say anything. They need space, but they also need boundaries. And so when I see pillows being thrown, shoes being thrown, that's when I need to step up and say something like, hey, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to throw. I might say that as a boundary because I don't want things to get out of control. That's different than punishing or shaming them. I'm setting up, they're overstepping a boundary of safety, and then I have to rein them back in. But learning how to calm yourself and separate yourself from the emotions of what's happening in the moment is a skill, and it's a really important skill. Maybe I'll do a podcast on that alone, even though my Anchor series really dives deep into that. The next thing is you want to validate their feelings without validating their fear. And so things like, I know this feels really scary right now, but you don't want to add, and it's okay, because it's not okay for them. And depending on what it is, you know, they might be freaking out because they touched something, and us saying it's okay can actually inadvertently be a compulsion, like a reassurance compulsion. So with OCD, it's so hard because you have to be so careful about what you say. But validating things is important. I know this feels really scary right now. I know you're feeling really frustrated right now. Now, for some kids, more is less. Some kids, you say that and they'll blow up. If you know how scary this feels, then why don't you just do what I'm asking? Especially if you're not enabling the OCD in that moment. For my son, I don't validate. I don't say anything. And I even try to get out of eyeshot. Eyeshot? I don't know if that's a word. I don't know why that sounded. Earshot. Okay, I need my second cup of coffee. I try to stay, not out of earshot. I try to stay out of his eyesight because him watching me respond to his behavior tends to escalate him. And so if I see him like that, like let's say I hear it in his room, I will be listening very, very closely for signs that sound like it's getting out of control, but I will not go up there because I've learned that when I go up and I try to stop the meltdown, it gets worse. And so every kid's different. So know what your child needs by figuring it out. You'll know very quickly when it doesn't go well. You can try to help use grounding techniques. It depends on the child. Some kids don't want to hear anything from you in that moment. And that's why I say in my difficult behavior course, all the work happens proactively. Once a meltdown is happening, the only thing you're doing is containment because it's already off the cliff. You can't get them back from the cliff. They're off the cliff. It's already done. It's containment. And the only thing you're doing when a meltdown is happening is making sure that they are safe, you are safe, people around you are safe, and property is safe. That's it. So doing things proactively ahead of time, and my difficult behavior course, it's a difficult behavior, how to handle difficult behavior caused by anxiety and OCD. So it's not a parenting course for difficult behavior. It's a parenting course for those of you that have kids with anxiety and OCD, and they're in these anxiety and OCD meltdowns, and how do you handle that? That's very specific. And the course has videos for parents, teens, and kids. So everybody's learning at the same time. I teach you, then I teach your child or teen. I separated the videos based on age, just so that my tone and delivery is either kid-friendly or it's teen-friendly. So like the kid one is cartoons, and the teen one I'm talking to them. And so that's the proactive stuff. How do we ground? What are our coping skills? I talk about zones in my difficult behavior class, like create safety zones of like where they can go and what they can do when they're upset. And then reinforce and incentivize them using those coping skills. That doesn't happen overnight, but those are the things that you want to do. You can't just throw coping skills at them when they're upset and there's been no proactive plan, no proactive practicing, no proactive work. It's not going to stick. If I say, take some deep breaths while they're upset, and we haven't talked about coping skills that they like, that resonate with them, they can go really angry very fast. Don't tell me to breathe, or don't tell me to walk, or it doesn't help. It doesn't help. And it may not help because you haven't done the proactive work to identify what are their coping skills that they enjoy? What are the things that they actually naturally do? What are some zones and proactive plans you can create? And then you have some shortcut work that you can do when they're having a meltdown of saying things like, do you need to go to a zone? Do you want to go to a zone? All that language that I teach in my difficult behavior class, you would have. The other thing that you want to do when they're having meltdowns is you want to set clear but compassionate boundaries. And so I know this is an example. I know you feel like you need to do this compulsion, but I'm not going to help OCD right now. Now, once you say that once or twice, you don't need to keep saying it because you're going to enrage them. Do it for me. You're not helping. You're not being helpful. They'll tell you these things. And you have to do your own work as a parent to understand that, yes, you are helping. Your child is not going to high five and say, fantastic job being consistent and setting boundaries. You're an amazing parent. You're not going to get feedback from them. You may not get feedback from them ever, or not until they're an adult and they say, that really did help me when you didn't feed my OCD. You might get that. You may not. So you have to understand the research and understand that that is therapeutically what you need to do. And then you don't want to problem solve in the middle of a meltdown or an OCD storm. You want to wait for that storm to pass. You want to wait until they're calm. And then you can talk about what happened when they're ready, which for some kids might be an hour or two afterwards. And for some kids, it might be a day afterwards. And you might have some kids where it's a never thing. They're just not, their mood stability is so erratic that it's never a good time. And then those are the kids that might need an assessment for medication or some other interventions, because you can't ever build those skills because they are always unstable. DBT is a great supplemental therapy for kids with anxiety and OCD on learning how to regulate their emotions and how to use coping skills. So that might be a supplemental thing that you do, or you sign them up for some DBT skills groups if you have them in your area to help them with that. So how do you prevent future OCD meltdowns? Well, at the crux of a lot of these meltdowns is just the heart of OCD. And so when you improve OCD in general, the meltdowns get better too. Unless we're dealing with pandas and pans or a co-occurring issue like a mood disorder or trauma, like there's some other elements that could be adding to this. But if it's just purely OCD meltdowns because OCD is not getting what OCD wants, when you do exposure and response prevention therapy, ERP, OCD loses its grip, its power, and they're able to handle discomfort more often and at a longer interval, that when you pull back and you say, I'm not enabling OCD, they can handle it. They may not like it, but they can handle it. The other thing that is helpful, like I said before, is DBT, teaching them distress tolerance skills, which is really at the heart of OCD in general, like teaching them how to tolerate discomfort and sometimes uncertainty. And I do feel like reinforcing their small wins is so important. And so saying things like, I saw that you sat with that discomfort for a few seconds right before they do the compulsion. And that's incredible. You should feel so proud of yourself. So even when it's not a full win in your book, they did the compulsion, but you saw them delaying it. If they like praise, some kids don't, it's helpful to recognize that. I saw that you sat there for a little while and you didn't give in to your OCD, and that was amazing. You should feel so proud of yourself. Same thing with a meltdown. I have had when my child will scream and rage and will throw a pillow or two and then will calm down. And it's not an hour. It's not even 30 minutes. It's a 10-minute, 15-minute meltdown. And then they clean up after themselves and they say they're sorry. I say that's a win. And I say that out loud. I say, you know what? you should actually really be proud of yourself. Now listen to my language too. I'm saying you should be proud of yourself, not I'm proud of you, because I don't want it to be a relationship issue. It's not that I'm only proud of you when you aren't melting down. You should be proud of yourself because I saw that was really hard. And in the past, that would have been like an hour-long meltdown. You wouldn't have cleaned up after yourself. You certainly wouldn't have come down and said you're sorry. And so there are layers of wins in how you handled yourself. You are going to get upset, and that is okay. Getting angry and upset isn't the problem. It's just what we do in the moment that is what we want to focus on. And you being able to have that outburst be shorter, and you actually going up and cleaning what you messed up without me saying anything, and on top of it, coming down and saying you're sorry, although you didn't have to say you're sorry. There's nothing to be sorry for. You didn't touch my stuff. You were in your room. Those are all huge wins. That really can pump up self-esteem and motivation. So look for the moments to be able to praise, to be able to recognize progress when they even take a step in the right direction. Sometimes I do this, like my child will be yelling and they talk quietly or calmly for a second. And I say, I really appreciate that you're talking calmly to me. Even though for the 5 minutes they were yelling at me and they kind of got tired and they talked normally, I seized that opportunity to praise them for that calm voice, and it continued. Now, some kids, I will say as a caveat, the minute you praise them, they actually do the opposite. So you have to know your child, because this doesn't work. Everything I talk about doesn't work with every single child. There's nuances, and some things don't work. Some kids don't like praise. Some kids don't want you to highlight those things. Know your child. But these are the things that can help. So it's important to remember that progress is slow but possible. It took, and I don't want to discourage you, my son has some mood instability issues, so we're dealing with NPANS, mysterious PANS issues we haven't really quite figured out. So we've got layers of stuff going on, but we still made progress. I see progress every single month, every single year, unless we have a med change, and then all bets are off. Or if kids get sick, sometimes you see them regress as well because there's inflammation, and inflammation increases anxiety and OCD. But I see progress with the families in the AT parenting community. I see progress with my own kids. And sometimes it's slow, and so you don't see progress as quickly. It's not going to happen overnight. But as you continue to work on these things, not enabling the OCD, developing coping skills proactively outside of the meltdowns, things do improve. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your child, and you will see progress over time. If you want in-depth support, where I will literally walk you and your child, teen, or young adult through how to develop zones, how to identify anxiety and OCD triggers, how to develop healthy coping skills, how to develop language when they're upset, all of that stuff, it's in my course, How to Handle Difficult Behavior Caused by Anxiety and OCD. You can check that out at natashadaniels.com/difficult behavior course. And for those of you that are in Europe, the way that I spell behavior is BEHAVIOR. No U in there. Otherwise, it will not send you to the right place. So check that out, natashadaniels.com/difficult behavior course. And don't forget to rate the podcast if you're enjoying the podcast. I appreciate that. We actually just discovered that we were not on Audible or Amazon for the last 5 years. I just discovered that. So I apologize for those of you that were listening over there, and you might be joining us back, or, it's been 5 years, so you may not. But we are back if you prefer to listen to episodes on Spotify, Audible, Amazon, obviously Apple. We are on all of those platforms and more. So if we are not on your platform and you prefer that we were on something else, just email us at atparentingsurvivalhelp@yahoo.com so that we can make sure we're on all the platforms that you want us to be on. If you write a review, I'll be reading one of your reviews because I greatly appreciate it. And I do want to thank you. I do want to thank JMama4G, who wrote a review. And she wrote, "Just what I needed. My 13-year-old son has OCD, and we've hit some bumps lately. And I've really needed to reset my mindset. And this podcast did just that. Plus, Natasha is so down to earth and relatable. I feel so encouraged having listened in today." Thank you for leaving a review. And I'm so glad, because that's kind of my goal. It's like, this is like verbal therapy for your brain, that we can inspire each other and talk about these struggles in a way that gives you hope, in a way that makes you feel like you have some concrete things to practice, do, or even think. So thank you for writing that review. And maybe if you write a review, I'll be reading yours next time. Don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Don't forget to sign up for my free series as well, atparentingsurvivalseries.com.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.